Before I get going, and I'm going to really try and use the next 14 minutes to really just drop something down into your memory cells, I would like to acknowledge the Tongva people, who are the original inhabitants and custodians of this land that we are gathered on today at UCLA. And I wish to pay my respect to the Tongva elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Native peoples present. I would like to acknowledge the UCLA leadership, the staff and faculty of the School of the Arts and Architecture, those of you who are direct contributors and supporters of this great school, and those of you, soon to be graduates, your families, friends, allies, and supporters. Wow, I mean, here we are. And I can tell you that as honored as I am, it's a very daunting task to figure out what to do with probably now about 13 minutes. What an auspicious occasion. And in preparing myself to offer your commencement address, I've had plenty of ideas and a million scattered thoughts that I've wanted to share with you. In fact, I'm still having them as I stand here. But finding form, as all of you well know, is another matter altogether, no matter how many ideas. By profession, I spend much of my time talking about art and artists, about the global tributaries of our creative legacies, about the integrity exercised in the practice of making work, the persistence of artistic vision, as David said earlier, and the substance of creative perspective. So I have been tempted to make this address about the enduring values in art and design, whether through object making or the evanescent world of dance, the spaces and places that shape the built environment, the poetics and aesthetics of design media, whose artists seem to see the infinite potential between 0 and 1, or the scholarship of intellectuals who mine the contours of world cultures and human heritage to give light to the songlines of our belonging. All of which combines into a grand collaboration between people across time and place. And it offers those who experience it a chance to connect with an exquisite attention that at some point may forever alter how we can experience the world. John Cage describes it succinctly. Art is a way of waking up to the very life we are living. And those of us who work within it are awake indeed. It is a fundamental requirement of our life's work. Normally, all of this is the sort of stuff that I try to illuminate for a broad public, especially now, in a time where perspective feels frayed, contorted, or temporarily untethered. But I've decided not to talk about any of this great stuff because you are now graduating from the School of the Arts and Architecture at UCLA, a school that has more art and design pouring out of it than many American cities have in their entire civic landscape, which means that you know this. It's already in your DNA. And it really must be said, you've also studied with some of the greatest practitioners in their field, people who are as generous in their roles as educators as they are as makers. I know these people. They are true giants. Giants that, whether you are aware of it or not, have been coaxing you up onto their ample shoulders so that your vantage point out into your own horizon will be as unobstructed as possible. And I think that this would be a good moment to acknowledge the faculty and the staff of the School of the Arts and Architecture. To the families, friends, and allies gathered here to celebrate your achievements, and to your parents and guardians particularly, whose faces I can actually see out there beaming with pride, and let's admit it, the tinge of the tenderness and anxiety that likely emanates from their long relationship with a highly developed protection impulse. That was good, actually, wasn't that? That was kind of good. Reflexes, people. They want you to have the necessary skills and assets, the leg up as you leave UCLA, that will enable you to successfully navigate an exponentially changing world and to forge a beautiful life. And all of us here join them in that same desire. So let me briefly affirm something. For all of the pressure points and uncertainties at hand, for all of the lack of assured outcomes, the guarantees, the creative community is involved in rigorous and abundant compassion. Our work is to help one another dream the culture forward. No small task, but an infinitely fulfilling one. And in the words of choreographer Deborah Hay, it is where and how we practice the deep ethics of optimism. Art and design are ways of knowing, and it is why we are so proficient in responding to an essential life question: how to proceed. We actually practice it every day, whether we're figuring out where to move our pen across a blank page, or a brush on a canvas, or a body on an empty stage, or a line of code, or a proportion in need of adjustment, which direction to swing the door, and so on. The artist and the designer will act, not freeze in the face of immense expectation or possibilities by being afraid of error, or pause in waiting for some form of permission, because really, from whom? These may seem small, but they apply to the same question at a meta level. How to proceed applies to the wonderment of our human condition. Artists and designers and culture workers are constantly mining this question, not to accelerate more opportunities for extracting things out of the world, but for the purposes of replenishment. To the students, we expect you to join us and welcome you fully on this day. Becoming a great artist, designer, architect, cultural activist, or brilliant educator are all incredible paths, but so is the act of living a creative life. Beyond what you make or whatever profession or job you pursue, your truest success will be in who you are as a human being. And for that voyage, I offer some advice, an insight on cubism, a story about the importance of picking apples, and the perspective one can find from a creperie stand in Paris. 7 more minutes in exactly that order. 2 points of advice. The Pitjantjatjara people of Australia, whose language is rapidly disappearing, have a word that I learned because of a theater project I had commissioned when running the Melbourne Festival: Napaji Napaji. In English, the term would essentially mean welcome, as in make yourself at home. But in Pitjantjatjara, this welcome greeting quite literally means you can bring your whole self to this place, which is not an emphasis on comfort as it is in English, but on trust. My advice: bring your whole self to this place. The second, since we did not spring forth at birth utterly entitled to a proven and assured outcome, it is important really, when confronted with the impulse of feeling thwarted or vexed over attaining absolutely every single thing that one desires, turn inward. My mother was born on the Okanagan Indian Reservation in the 1930s, and while I was not raised in the native tradition, I was taught the concept of 7 generation. It goes something like this: I am the cumulative result of the conditions and of the efforts of the 7 generations of people preceding me, those still alive and with me, and those that have long since passed on. And while standing in my own body, in my time, what I do with myself will carry into the 7 generations ahead. This is about consciousness, and I feel it galvanizing in its offer of clarity whenever I am tempted by the allures of complacency, because it emboldens my determination. My advice: consider who came before you and their continuing presence in you. Fire from the knowledge that you will impact what comes next. Understand that this sense of kinship does not only apply to your bloodline, and in doing so, you are never alone. Important to state right this very second is that I am not always capable of being my best self, which should be noted, nor have I met anyone yet who is. But I do not lead others, advocate, or take a major decision from the position of being my worst self, and that's something. And as long as I'm dispensing advice, I also don't cook a meal for anybody when I'm in a less than generous frame of mind, because I've been told that this is really a big mistake. Just passing it on. Okay, now for insight. The other day, it was my son's 6th grade culmination, and in the lead up to that very big deal, the school turned their hallways into a gallery space where the outgoing 6th graders shared their reflections on what they had studied, worked together on, and had newly discovered. For my son, this was cubism. And there on the wall, I think the Cubist project showed me that there are no mistakes in art. Malachi Edmunds Warby. So there you have it. There are no mistakes in art. Isn't that liberating? Making your work has to proceed no matter what your mood is. In fact, it may not always emanate from a place of unbridled joy. So if you happen to be in a less than generous state of mind for some random reason in this life ahead, off chance, keep going. This will not be a mistake. You might invent a whole entire art movement by doing it, and inspire a sixth grader to land on a piece of wisdom some decades later on. Proceed without fear and leave evidence of care in everything you put your whole self onto. Now, this is a story about learning how to pick apples. Might be the most important thing I say. Not in a grocery store, but off of a tree. My father's side of the family worked the crops across Washington state, migrating through the abundant fruit orchards over the harvest season every summer. The apple orchards of the Wenatchee Valley were their specialization. So when I was 5 years old, my uncle, who was an apple picker in the master grand tradition, set me off to work. And in case you haven't been in the orchards, there are a few basic ground rules. Pickers are dispersed off into orchards in assigned sections. The way you make money is to fill up the large bins. The more bins you fill, the more you earn. And you get paid at sunset by the orchard manager, depending exactly on how many bins you have hauled out of that orchard and up to the trucks. No one picking apples sets their price. And every apple picker, therefore, works as fast as they can through each tree. My uncle had me watch all of the pickers before he sent me off into the orchard, and I could spot who was the fastest. I asked him if they were the best. No, he said. Do you see those trees over there that have the most apples on them? I did. Well, the best pickers were the ones who picked those trees last year. They knew which apple to pick and how to pick it. The best always leave their spur intact. And the spur is what carries the next year's fruit. If you go too fast, you get careless, or worse, you are just plain greedy. Hurt the spur, and you damage the harvest next time in the year ahead. There won't be very much to pick. No matter how fast and furious life pressures can be while you are off picking your own apples, try to remember to leave the spur intact. And last but not least, perspective. The night before the 2016 presidential election, I landed in Paris. I was there for work. My hotel was next to the Bataclan nightclub, which was about to reopen that week for the first anniversary after the terrorist attack the year before. There were refugees camped in the green strips of the Grand Boulevard out in front of my hotel. The US election, the staggering volume of refugees throughout the city, and the anniversary of the Paris bombings were the topics of every single discussion while I was there, except for one. The night I arrived, I went to a French play that ended just before midnight. I was elated to spot a tiny creperie stand with the light on and a line of people in front of it. The proprietor, cook, and sole employee had a long menu of options, traditional ingredients and Middle Eastern ingredients. Let's call them interdisciplinary crepes, shall we? The top sellers were his own invention: halal meats, aromatic spices, or rice and seasoned vegetables carefully folded into the perfect French crepe, €3 each. As I pondered my choices, he offered me hot cinnamon tea free of charge if I could place my order in French. And he provided me with an ebullient tutorial to assist my pronunciation of mushrooms, because he really, really wanted me to have that free cup of tea. He said that giving away his tea was part of his enjoyment of his work, a part of his personhood, his culture. He was of Syrian and Iraqi descent who had fled to Tunisia and was now also a Frenchman. While making my crepe, he insisted on calling a taxi for me. It was well past midnight, and the neighborhood was uneven, he said, so he wanted to assure my safe return. So while I ate and he closed up for the night, we waited for the taxi and talked about truisms in kindness and solidarity. Yes, truly, we did. This is not fake news. We must act from the heart, he said. This solidarity between us is what makes life have meaning. It's a simple expression of common love to help one another. He told me that if I gave him a tip or any money at all for his gesture of aid, it would offend his intention. For the crepes, of course. It is my livelihood and a service to you. For the taxi and the French lessons, no. That is my independence, my liberty, and my expression of solidarity with you. Perspective can be found in unexpected forms. Be open. To the graduates of the School of the Arts and Architecture, class of 2017, look inward when at a crossroad. Use your whole self and try to perceive what came before you. Proceed with the knowledge that you will impact what comes after you. Find what you will do for a living, take agency, and offer your solidarity. Err on the side of kindness, leave a spur, be open. There are no mistakes in art, and where there certainly are in life, try to learn the lesson that converts a mistake into a gift for correcting course. Dream the culture forward. A 6th grader somewhere is counting on you. So is a 3rd grader. In fact, he's standing right over there. Oh yeah, don't cook for people when you're in a bad mood. And if you don't know how to cook, don't worry about it too much. You know plenty of the things already, and they will carry you far. Congratulations, and here's to your incredible life.